going to turn this over to Randy Pierce.
Good girl.
There you go.
Good girl. Oh, my mic's on.
You're on.
Thank you very much. Find that podium, girl. She's the only dog in the country who knows the definition of podium. It's a good vocabulary word. So this is the lovely Autumn from Guiding Eyes for the Blind. Autumn, down. Get her situated here. She has heard me talk a time or two, so she may take a nap. I hope none of you do. I understand now that not only am I charged with sharing a little bit of a message with you, but I'm also charged with delaying your access to the refreshments. That's a little more pressure than I knew I had coming into tonight. Now, I am Randy Pierce, as he said. I do live in Nashua, New Hampshire, though I grew up in a tiny town in the top of the state called Colebrook, New Hampshire, and spent a lot of time in Durham during college days. And I'm going to tell you a fair bit about myself. As he said, Randy's going to talk about himself a lot. Boy, that sounds like some vanity issue run amok. But I am going to share some about myself. But ironically, I think the power of my message is that I'm going to try to share a little vision with you and perhaps a little insight on how the right choices we can make in our lives can make all the difference between feeling success, experiencing success on a personal level, on a professional level, in fact, in any way we want to go about it. So that said, I'm not going to share a pity story with you, but I'm going to start by showing you how things descended for me. Because I was fully sighted growing up, I was involved in every activity I could. I was in band and chorus, I played every sport, I was in drama club, I was in scouting. Basically anything that distracted me from my homework was what I was trying to pursue. And that let me have many rewards, because being invested in life, being in the experiences of life, lets you see what is important to you, what's fascinating, what's of interest to you. It helps build the passion and the drive to pursue those things. And that was all well and good, right up until 1 year after I graduated from the University of New Hampshire, when in the span of 2 weeks, I lost all of the sight in my right eye, totally gone, and half in my left eye into a tight tunnel vision. And the cause of it, they didn't know at the time, but 2 weeks to go from fully sighted to legally blind was devastating. And I was angry, and I was in denial, and I had a lot of negative emotions, as you might expect. But the most powerful, damaging emotion and response I had is that I felt anything fun and anything important in my life was no longer possible. And if that had been true, my life would be pretty miserable. But it's not. As I said, this isn't a pity story. I just want to show you how low we all can go, certainly how low I went, to help you understand how high we can climb. Because the problem didn't stop there. Over the next 11 years, I had 7 more episodes, and it took away all the sight. So I'm now totally blind, or illegally blind, I guess now, is the other side of that. And that was a big change. That was hard. And it attacked other parts of my brain. What they found I have is mitochondrial disease. So my nerves are dying in my brain, in my hands, in my legs, and they don't really understand what causes it. But in 2004, it put me into a wheelchair because my balance center, my cerebellum, was destroyed. And I spent 1 year, 8 months, and 21 days in a wheelchair. That tells you how I felt about it. It was hard, right? Being blind and in a wheelchair means that one hand on a cane, one hand on one wheel, I could spin myself in a circle. And that's how I felt about life at that point. And there's one last step down I want to share. And again, reminding you that I'm going to climb to some great heights, I think. But the last step is, while I was in the wheelchair, I had a dog guide at the time trying to help me find a way to have him guide me despite the wheelchair. And there wasn't a program in the country to do that at that point in time. There is today, and we worked with some of the people trying to pioneer that. But the reason we didn't get to accomplish it is that on May 23rd, 2005, my boy, Austin, he collapsed. And on May 24th, he was gone to me. One of the hardest moments of my life. He had a tumor growing on his heart, a cancerous tumor. It caused him no pain, but on that day, it reached the right size, and it split his heart. And as you might guess, it split mine as well. Because I was thinking, how many times is life going to hit me with something that sets me back when I try to work forward all the time? How many times do I have to try to get up again? And Nelson Mandela really gave the best answer. We're not judged by how many times we fall down. We're really judged by how many times we get back up. And the answer to how many times I have to do it is, each time that I get knocked down by something, that's my opportunity to get back up. And I don't have to choose it, but if I don't choose to get back up, I don't have a chance for all the future rewards I think you can earn if you choose the right response. Now, I know my wife wants me to go to the next slide sooner before this computer stalls on us. So when I say this presentation is reaching our peak potential, I mean it literally and figuratively. Tracy, if you'd flip slide for me. And I know this shot has been out there for advertising, but I love this shot. It's my second favorite shot. I think it's funny that a blind guy has a favorite picture anyhow, right? But there's my boy Quinn, the mighty Quinn, with his golden muzzle thrust kind of majestically up into that blue sky background, and his eyes are closed, and he's basking in the sun shining on him, and I'm hunched over and tired. This is a theme you'll see in our work together. I'm on the top of Mount Monroe. It's January 2012 during our winter goal of climbing all 48 in one winter. And people say, well, why in the world would you climb mountains? Well, I think how and why are both important. On the why, when you're in a wheelchair and you can't walk, you learn what a gift we have in being able to walk. So I celebrate walking. And hiking turned out to be just walking under some fantastic conditions. But the real reason is because I find mountains are synonymous with challenge. And I believe that goals are so essential to our reaching the destinations we want. And goals, I call it positive adversity. And there's three big advantages I think any of us can receive when we set goals. First is you're going to reach goals that you set. If you don't set them, how are you ever going to reach them? How are you going to get that? And if you're choosing your goals, that's why it's positive. Don't choose goals you don't want. Choose things that are important to you, that add value to your life. And you'll reach them more often by setting them than by just seeing what happens. The second advantage you have is that the skills you develop in reaching for goals, it falls into that. You've probably heard practice makes perfect. I don't believe that. I think practice makes better. And if you practice reaching goals, you get better at reaching goals. So the second benefit is you now have the skills and tools you need to reach more goals, which is fantastic. And the third big benefit that I think comes from that is I called goals positive adversity because that toolkit that you learn when you're reaching goals is the same one you need for the other kind of adversity, the adversity you didn't necessarily want. You know, I didn't want to go blind. That wasn't part of it, but I can use the same skills. So when I first lost my vision, I was devastated. Didn't have any tools for handling that. When I went completely blind, it was still hard, but I had the tools to work. When I went into the wheelchair, I had the tools to find and work my way out of it. And when my boy died, I had the tools to say, I know how to go forward and get to the places I want to go. Because what I want to do is I want to celebrate ability awareness. I have a disability. I can't see. We all have disabilities. That's the meaning of the word, disability, something we can't do. And I believe that what you can do is always going to be more important in your life than what you can't do. And I believe one other thing, and that's part of the focus of this, is that if there's something you can't do, and it's important to you, then you change that. And you change it from what you can't do to what you can do very simply. Henry Ford gave us the key. The first step, he said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. If you don't believe in yourself, you're setting yourself on a path to failure. But when you choose to believe, you're starting on the right way. You know, I call it believe and achieve, but it's not magic. It doesn't just happen because you believe it. It requires two big things: problem solving and perseverance. You've got to be willing to figure out how. You know, people go from I can't, because that's where I was when I first went blind, to can I, to how can I? And that's the important question. Ask, how can I? You know, in my instance, I love this example. It sounds foolish, but it's really powerful in my life. There was a first morning of total blindness. And one of the things I wanted to do that morning was brush my teeth as I start off every morning. And putting toothpaste on a toothbrush when you can't see either of them, well, let's just say I put it on the brush, the counter, the mirror, my shirt, and my cheek because it was hard. I had, how much is coming out? Where's it going? And I could have had a lot more battles with toothpaste, but I chose a really easy problem solution, which is that I asked somebody who'd already solved the problem. I was out at guide school getting my first dog guide, and I said, how do you do that? And they said, easy. It's my toothpaste. I hold it to my lips, squeeze in, I can tell how much is coming out, and it's got no spill room. Easy solution, right? So now if there's toothpaste on the counter at my home, it's my wife's fault, and she knows it. And I better say nice things later if I want to ride home tonight. So now, that said, it's a really simple and obvious solution, but it highlights the first step is, has somebody solved the problem you're trying to solve? And if so, let that be the start of your solution process. The second method of problem solving is being a pioneer. And there's some clues that we'll get to for you for doing that. I believe teamwork and communication can be essential in helping you do that. Obviously, you can do some on your own. But it's fine for me to tell you that I've accomplished these things. I'd like to try to show you if we can show a little video clip. We may have a little audio problem, so let's see how well it plays for us. Tracy, would you?
On December 22nd,
Yeah, that audio track is gone. I'm sorry, so I'm going to fill in a little while that's going, and we're going to sort of ignore that soft sound. So I chose to try to do all 48 in one single winter because I wanted to celebrate ability awareness.
I'm
46 humans had done it at that point. And 2 dogs. And boy, think of the work of my dog in guiding me up with it.
If I told you the numbers of people in New Hampshire that are blind, you'd be stunned.
I know there's one track missing, apparently one
It's an
track
invisible malady. Because when people go blind, all too often, they hide. I had confidence that I would give my all, but I had no confidence that that was enough.
Four more feet. Coming May 2012.
So obviously at the end of that clip, somebody wearing a camera took a pretty nasty fall. That was Mount Whiteface, just as you go from Blueberry Ledges to go up the steeper part. And the great news, at least from my perspective, is it wasn't me. It was a fully sighted friend of mine, Justin Sylvester, and as we were hiking together, we hit kind of an interesting point and taught a fine lesson there. We reached the edge and I said, I think we should put our microspikes on, kind of a cleat device that goes on the bottom of your boot, help you handle traction. Right? It's not quite as aggressive as a crampon. And he said, I don't think we need them. Well, he believes me now. But what it highlighted are 2 things. I love a quote by one of the winningest basketball coaches of all time, John Wooten. What he said is, we don't plan to fail, we fail to plan. When you want to accomplish something, you absolutely can just try it, and you may have some success. But if you take the time to plan, to find the way to do it right, you'll succeed more often, and you'll succeed with fewer injuries, with fewer problems and setbacks, right? And in that instance, I think that it made no sense not to put them on, and I stopped and put mine on. So I asked him afterwards, I said, what was your objection, Justin? Why didn't you want to put them on? He's like, well, it's pretty cold today. I didn't think we needed them, and I didn't want to stop and be cold. Okay, but we did stop because I put mine on. He said, right, that's where I was sort of being stubborn, I think. I'm like, well, what do you mean? And the point is this. He had an idea that we didn't need them. I took away his objection. And instead of reevaluating and saying, my objection is gone, why not put them on? He was kind of holding on to that. And I get that. It's so easy to hold on to our ideas, even when the biggest reason to do it or to not do it are taken away. And we need to always try to challenge ourselves to keep our mind open to possibility. How could we do this differently? Should we do this differently? And even if we've been doing something for a long time, who knows what's changed? So there's a lot of reason to consider it. Now, that said, I'll show you how I do it later, but there's another powerful message in this video, and that's the name, 4 More Feet. It was obviously the 4 more feet of my dog guide next to me, but it had another meaning too. It had a double entendre, which was this. In that winter, as we were closing in on our time destination, because you hit the end of March, you've got to be done by March 22nd that year, and we were on March, I believe it was March 6th. We'd had 3 weeks of horrid, cold, stormy weather, and we couldn't go up into the Prezzies. And we needed to get the 4 northern Prezzies, and we wanted to do a traverse. So that's Mount Madison, Mount Adams, Mount Jefferson, and ending on Mount Washington before we headed down. So we finally had a weather window. We get up there, and we're crossing, and several things went wrong, but we're still able to make it. But I'm tired. And as we're above tree line for 8 miles on a cold, windy day, and by cold and windy, Madison was the coldest and windiest. It was warming up, and the wind was dying down. We don't know what it was there. But when we got to Washington, it was minus 27 with 50-mile-an-hour winds. So it was significant. And I was tired. I knew I had more in me. But, you know, I can't see how much further we have. I can't set a goal of just reaching to that knoll and taking a break. I hike left, right, repeat. And I don't want to be in that mindset, but when you're tired, that can happen. And I stopped at one point, and I hunched over, and I put my elbows on my knees to kind of rest. And I was like, Justin, how much further? And he shouts out over the wind, 4 more feet. I'm 6'4". I was 4 feet away from the summit of Washington. Now, that's funny, right? I suddenly had tons of energy, took one big step, and there we were. And I knew I was able to go on. I knew I wasn't at any dangerous level. I just needed a little something to know. And I think about our goals because whether you can see or not, our goals are not always something visual. And what you know is when you stop trying, that's when it becomes awful hard to reach that goal. And there's a time to choose and say, you know what, there's reasons I need to not stop. In the case of the mountains, there are conditions where turning around are the decisions I've been most proud of. But when there's not a reason other than you need a little bit of willpower and a little perseverance, sometimes you got to realize it might just be 4 more feet, and that going a little more is what you need to get there. And it's amazing how much energy you find when you know how close you are to your goals. But we don't always get to know that. So always be willing to go a little further, 4 more feet, perseverance. Now, I wanted to call attention, right? Why did I do the 48 in one winter? I had set out originally in 2010. I was going to take a nice leisurely 10 years, like Bill Bryson's A Walk in the Woods. I'm going to take a leisurely 10 years to climb all 48. And as I was into that, I was learning how good Quinn was at guiding me. And think about this job he did, right? He's 2 feet tall, I'm 6'4". If you were doing his job, you'd be guiding somebody roughly 18 feet tall, weighing over 700 pounds, with feet the size of a table, up these narrow, twisty trails with drop-offs and water crossings. And by the way, if you do it well, you get a pat on the head and some kibble, right? It's a lot to ask. That's a tough job when you look at it. But I think it certainly shows his accomplishment. But in that ability awareness I mentioned, 46 people, 2 dogs had done it at that point when we started out. And I said, that would really showcase what I mean about celebrating your ability awareness. And that's why we chose it. Now, I mentioned that I had done all of those, the hiking. There was some mention that, I've run some marathons, and there's Tough Mudders, which we'll show you a clip of in a few minutes. But other things besides athletics that I'm proud of. I'm chairman of 2 different boards. I'm president of my Lions Club. I've had a story published, and I'm currently working on a full book right now. We just announced that we'll be sharing that updates along the way for those who are at our last auction or those who follow us on our website. There's a way you can get there. I'm active. I've had a Emmy Award nomination. It was a Sports Emmy Award in 2007. I failed, so I'm the Susan Lucci of New Hampshire. But not to worry. Willem Lang and Windows to the Wild over at New Hampshire Public Television did a piece on me called Hiking in the Dark. And that won the Emmy Award last spring. So I guess we've atoned. Now I really am Susan Lucci because she did too. And I've done 2 TED Talks. My second one has just gone live last week. We haven't even shared it on our social media. We're waiting for them to finish up, but it's up there and live. And that's a really great honor. But what it shows is ability awareness in many different ways, not just athletically, because the things that are more important aren't the athletic accomplishments. It's the messages I get to share with you tonight. I've shared it with 46,000 students throughout New England over the last 5 years, because I think teamwork and communication and ability awareness are really fundamental to learning how to goal set, problem solve, and persevere to accomplish things. So that said, I want to talk a little about team setting. Tracy, could you go to the hiker picture, I think is next? This is a picture, I hope, of a group of hikers on East Cannon Summit. It's not the final summit, but it was my 47th and a half summit, a little bit further, and I'm going to be on the summit of Cannon. And that would be my 48th peak, and of course I have to get down again. But I stopped here to celebrate with that group. Most of the time when I hiked, I didn't have that size group with me. It was two or three of us often. But what I did have is every one of those people helped me somewhere along the way, whether it was problem solving, whether it was practicing, whether it was a winter hike, summer hike, somewhere along the way, they helped me. And what we learned is I became better the more I hiked. And now I'm going to tell you my one secret is that summer hiking is so much harder for me. It's twisty, rocky. Where do you put your foot? Every step is hard. Winter, it becomes smooth. So my biggest challenge goes away in the winter. I get new challenges, right? Wearing a hat means I don't hear as well. Wearing gloves means I can't feel as well. But my hardest challenge is still gone. So I got good at winter hiking compared to summer hiking. So people who found me very slow in the summer joined me on a winter hike, and I got up to that summit well before much of our crew. And I stopped and said, we're going to wait here and get a picture of everybody together, because we'd said we wanted to do that. Because when we got to the summit of Cannon, there was going to be a host of people who took the tram up. And I want to celebrate with those people too. But I wanted to make the people who got me in the world feel special, because they made me feel special. And I think that's a message. Maya Angelou said it really powerfully. She said, people will forget what you say, and they will forget what you do long before they will forget how you made them feel. Make the people around you feel appreciated for what they do. And there's a side to that. You should surround yourself with people who make you feel that way, who are positive, help encourage you towards goals. And it's okay to have positive criticism. Hey, here's my concern with you doing that, Randy. I want somebody asking me that. I don't want to be a risk taker. I want to be a problem solver. Because I think a problem solver can do everything a risk taker does with more success and fewer injuries, just like back on on the on the slope when Justin fell. So I think you have to build a community around you. You have to build a team around you that helps you evaluate your solutions, helps you build goals, and that you do the same for. And if people aren't that influence in your life, maybe you ought to think about what their role could be. Can you communicate them into it? Can you help them change and grow? And if not, maybe you ought to find other people to help fill in that time. Because really, together everyone achieves more is the acronym for team. And the more you learn to build a positive team, the further you can go, the higher you can climb, I think. Right? So I say that, obstacles are a part of that process and teams help you find that. And I don't think there's a video clip I've had in my world, in my experience, that illustrates that more powerfully than this Tough Mudder clip. Just what is a Tough Mudder? It's a 10.5-mile obstacle course. It was originally designed to test British Special Forces to see if you were ready for their program. And it has become, in our world, a highly team-oriented set where you're not competing with each other, you're competing with the course, working together. And what a wonderful community it is. Tracy, would you flip slides for me?
I am Randy Pierce, and for about 20 years now, I've been totally blind, and that's going to make this Tough Mudder a little more challenging.
Hand it back, I'll go back. Second round? Oh, okay, you're going to roll.
The truth is, going blind was really hard. I thought everything fun and everything important in my life was no longer possible. And it's just ludicrous to me because now I, climb mountains and run marathons and do Tough Mudders. And our message here really for us is we're out living the life that we believe, right? There are obstacles, there are opportunities.
Tough Mudder, 10.5 miles of just awfulness.
Pretty much true.
Hey! Come away. Keep moving forward, Randy. Go backwards so I can talk
I reached up, felt gently, found where the bar was, put my hand not on it so I knew my head wouldn't hit.
Gotcha.
My life isn't about my blindness, it's about the choice I made and how to respond.
Bring your hand down. There you go. That's the swing.
I don't feel bad. I gave everything I could. That's my goal every time, right?
The more I invest in life and be in those moments, the more rewards I keep getting.
Holding off the wall, I take it.
Learning to look at the world differently is the key to really having vision, and vision is always going to be way more important than sight.
Look at this video that's gone viral of Randy Pierce participating in a Tough Mudder challenge, despite being blind. Randy jumped in a trapeze, swung out, and rang a bell only 10% of contestants managed to touch.
Every day of my life, I wish I could see. But I would choose to be blind to learn all the lessons I've learned, to come to this point in my life and have so many great people around me that I wouldn't change it. And blindness, if that's what it took for me to get here and have such a wonderful life, then I welcome it.
So, it's funny, Art. Thank you very much. It's okay, girl. Down. She thinks when you applaud, it's time for refreshments. I love, they gave us shirts that said, I see no obstacles, which is kind of nice double entendre, but they put one on my guide dog. I really hope she sees the obstacles, or I'm in a lot of trouble. There's some powerful messages about obstacles there, and also about how to feel about things. And we're gonna cover a lot of that, but I think that here's the key to me. It's the most powerful part of the message I can give you, is that we influence our lives every day with the decisions we make. Who's going to be our friends? How are we going to approach this school project? Or how are we going to approach this work project? Those choices influence our lives. But you know, things happen to all of us that we don't expect. Maybe because we didn't influence it right, or maybe just some bad luck. We always, and you'll hear this from a lot of sources, have the choice in how to respond to that. And that's important. But what I think is even more important is that the choice you make in how you respond to anything, that choice will have a bigger impact on your life than any challenge ever could. And that's what I said in there, right? My life isn't about my blindness. It's about all the choices I've made and how I get to live as a result. Yes, blindness does give me bad days. I get up some mornings and I'm like, really? I have to be blind again today, right? It's hard sometimes, but I do this all the time. And now almost thousands of presentations, I ask people what I'm going to ask you. If you've never had a challenge, would you raise your hand? Never had a challenge, raise your hand. I've never seen a hand yet. Good, you're still with me. Not because I'm blind. It's my wake-up test to see if I've lost you halfway through here. Not because I'm blind, but because we all have challenges. That's the reality of life. And life is going to be about what you do in regards to that challenge. And in my case, that's certainly really true. But it's true for you, and it's true in other ways as well, right? You're going to let the challenge define you. I call it transition trauma. The moment a challenge hits you, that's probably the hardest it has to be. You may make it harder, you may make it stay there, but if you make the right choices, that challenge can begin to get easier and can begin to go in the positive direction by the choice you make and the actions you take. And to do that best, you know, in my first parry into blindness, I was so frustrated that I needed a little help too. And if I didn't get that, who knows where I'd be. I think I'm strong enough and would have come around, but that's where having a good team behind you can make a world of difference. And to that team, I want to talk about communication because it's so essential. And I want to share an example that Quinn taught me on a mountain. We're hiking in the winter, and the way a guide dog works is with intelligent disobedience. They naturally move you around obstacles, and if they can't avoid it, like if I wanted her to take me off this stage, there's a step we're not going to avoid. She would stop, she would disobey me, and wait for me to find that edge. And so when she stops at the edge, my job is to find it. And I look with my foot first, and if I don't find anything, because maybe it's not a stair or a curb or a stage, maybe it's a tree branch. She's warning me of my height, and at 6'4", boy, that's a lot better than my cane can do, right? Because my cane doesn't help me there. I know, Nashua, we used to have trees on Main Street. They used to cut them to 6'2". I'm 6'4", you know how I know, right? But my guide dog makes that difference. But Quinn and I, out in the woods, winter hiking, he stops me for a branch, and my job is to show him I know it's there. So got it, found the branch, good boy, off we go, and he stops me again. And, you know, I say hop up, which means go if you can, and he inches forward. And I learned a lesson, I'll tell you how in a second. I learned a lesson to trust him, to trust the process. But I say go, and he, a little more. So I asked Justin, who was with me, I said, can you figure out why he's stopping like that? And Justin said, well, there's a branch, but it's probably 8 feet still in front of you. So why wasn't he doing that? And you know, I was frustrated with Quinn. I was a little upset that he wasn't doing his job right. Why is he stopping so soon? This isn't going to work. And what it turned out, as we experimented and found out, is that when he stopped me for that branch in the winter, and I tapped the branch, a foot of snow fell on his head, and he didn't like it very much. So he didn't want to fall for that trick again. So how many times in communication do you get a result different than what you expect, and it's so easy to blame the source? When maybe you have to say, well, what else could have changed? Why could this be different? And the best way is to communicate. I can't ask Quinn, hey, why are you stopping so soon? But we can, as people, talk with each other and find the root of the problem. And if we learn to do that, we take away a lot of frustration and we get a lot further. What Quinn and I did is we changed the process. When it was a tree branch, instead of stopping for it, he would stop and then curl in front of me. Because we need to be fast because it's cold. You spend too much time stopped, you're going to get cold and you're not going to get through the mountains. So always be open to think about how is the other person thinking and why. And instead of just guessing, ask, because you may find out there's a good reason. Like, why did you just try to tie me up in the middle of this presentation? I wish I knew that part, but I'm glad I felt that before we got in trouble. So on that note, I'm going to try to move along on some slides and some other messaging, right? But I think there's a good communication lesson. Tracy, would you flip slide for me? I hope what we have here is Quinn and I with the Boston Marathon finish line in the background. And when I wanted to hike, I wanted to get better at hiking. I wanted to not be hunched over and tired all the time. So I began taking longer and longer walks with my guide dog. And guide dogs weren't being used anywhere in this country, or in the world really, for running. And there's a reason. The schools actually tell you, we don't want you running with your dog guide. And I respect that, and there's a reason for it. So what I did with Quinn, is I took longer and longer walks. But I have a reward system for my dogs. They work so hard for me that I want to thank them for that, right? Building community, building teams. You got a responsibility to each other. So when we walk in the door after a working session, the first thing I do is pay them, and there's nothing a Labrador wants better than play. Maybe food, but play. So we call it the payment plan instead of the payment plan. And I walk in the door, we play tug of war, throw a ball, whatever it is, and they love it. So what happens that I didn't expect is when I'm halfway done my walk and start towards home, my dogs know play is coming, and they pick up the pace. They want to go faster. In fact, the last stretch down my street, I could lose my arm sometimes. All right? But as he got faster and faster on these longer walks, I had somebody from Guiding Guys coming up to visit me, and I said, you know, he's almost making me trot. He wants to go so quick. And he said, well, let me see. And he said, he's doing his job fine. And that's a lot for a dog to think about. How close are you to the side? They got to hold you tight so that you're not in the road. Is there a pothole? Is there a frost heave in New England? Can you imagine? Right? Or a tree branch. So the faster they do that, the harder it is. But as he was watching me, he said, he's fine. Go ahead, go with it. Let's see what speed you want to get to. And we were trotting. And he said, you're fine. As long as he's doing that, keep going. Well, that pace picked up. And I remember the morning I was doing a loop of road. And as I'm going along, I hear footsteps ahead of me. And I'm sort of trotting a little bit, I think. And I realize I'm going to pass somebody. So I want to give them a heads up because, right, it's a blind guy. I don't want to do something wrong. I said, just warning you, I'm coming up from behind. I'm totally blind. And it kind of laughs a little sarcastically as I pass. I'm like, did I do something wrong? He's like, no, I'm out running. And I have to tell my wife that I got passed by a blind guy. So that led me to thinking, you know, maybe we really are running, and maybe we can do a little more with this. Now, Quinn and I ran 33 road races together during our time. And you know, each time, the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, sort of requires that they have to let me, but I don't want to come in with a hammer. I don't want to say, hey, you have to let me. I want to talk to race directors and educate, because education is such a smoother, easier way to accomplish anything. And I would say, I want to run your race. I'm totally blind, and I run with a guide dog, which I know isn't very typical, but here's the races I've run. And most race directors are happy to work with me. Some of them less so. You know, I remember the Market Square Day in Portsmouth. They said, well, will you start last? I'm like, I will, but I'm not slow. So if you make me start last, I'm going to interact with more of the people. I really should start in my speed division. And they say, humor us. So I said, okay. And, you know, I was really proud. I finished in the top 10% of that race, starting in the very back, which meant I passed a lot of people. But there was an accident in the race. It was kind of a fun moment because I was so concerned with how well he did weaving me in people, slowing me, finding the opportunities to pass. And at this one point, I heard this tremendous crash up to my right. And I'm tipping my head. I don't know how I could have caused it, but I'm still thinking about it. And the woman running next to me at the time says, that was not your fault. That guy was so amazed by your guide dog's work that he was watching you when he ran into the water table. It was a pretty fun moment. Now, in this picture, so the Boston Athletic Association, I'm going to air some dirty laundry for them. They took a different approach to when I tried to ask them about running with my dog guide, because no dogs allowed on that course. And that's the 5K, even though it's the marathon finish. It's not the marathon there. And he, they ignored me. They didn't answer my phone calls. They didn't return them. They didn't answer my emails, right? And I understand, right? Ignore the problem, hope it goes away. But I'm a little more stubborn than that. So I showed up, right? We could readdress it there if they wanted to, but now I'm signed up and they had their chance to really discuss it. They didn't say a thing, but they posted this picture, so I guess they like it. And you know, there's Quinn with maybe one paw on the ground, tongue hanging out, joy on his face, and what am I doing? I'm hunched over and tired again, right? But the real power in this photo is that flag display, this is 2013, one day later would explode. And sometimes with community, when people don't learn how to interact in healthy ways, to resolve differences with reasonable approaches, you can have some real horrors happen. And, you know, I'm not blind to those horrors. I understand and respect that we have to look at how to solve those problems. But I also want to put my focus where it belongs. In that instance, I looked at the emergency responders. You know, we have video of people running after the first bomb exploded. They're running to help victims. A second bomb goes off in front of them, and they don't break stride, because sometimes in the lives of those kinds of people, heroes, it's worth a little risk to help people, to save lives. I love those people, and I didn't want to react in fear and be afraid to run those. In fact, I promised I was going to run the Boston Marathon 1 year later, 2014. That was my commit. I wanted to do it because I wanted to be part of that community experience. You know, I have a friend, Teddy Bruschi, used to play linebacker for the Patriots. We have a great friendship, and he ran the marathon. He called it the Super Bowl of all road races. But the part I like better is he said it's a 26.2-mile home stadium because people line up, literally a million people line up along the side to cheer on the elite athletes and the elite stories that are out there, because the marathon is filled with human potential, people just achieving in ways that will inspire and humble any of us. And I wanted to be a part of that community. I wanted to be part of saying, this is my answer to tragedy. Positive responses. And you know what? I failed to keep that promise. And I don't look at it as failure, because I think framing failure is so important. You know, I have a friend who, he's a professor out at UNH, and he says, I'm amazed how many people try to hate themselves to perfection. It's okay to have setbacks, and you don't have to be so hard on yourself. Yes, drive yourself, encourage yourself. Don't be afraid that you can fail, but also put it in perspective. Why did I fail in that instance? I failed because that year, we were hiking, finished our hiking goals, and Quinn got osteosarcoma, bone cancer on his skull, terminal and very quickly. So I didn't train. I wasn't going to run a marathon when I wanted to dedicate my time to the boy who'd been my partner, who'd helped me do so many things. So I took care of him. The marathon could wait. I could put it off a year, which is what I did. Tracy, would you flip slide for me? So when I lost Quinn on January 20th of 2014, probably the saddest day of my life, what I said is, now I'm going to honor him. Now I have purpose. I promised I was going to run that marathon. I was still going to do it. But now I was going to do it for him and for me and a lot of other things. I ran 4 marathons mostly that year. In fact, there's 2 people in the room who helped me mostly run one of them. In those 4 marathons, I ran the first one in May to qualify. I just wanted to get my Boston Marathon qualifier. It's hard to do. You got to be fairly fast. But if you're blind, they're much gentler on that time because they don't expect you to run quick when you're blind. And there's some people who prove that wrong. I'm not one of them, but I'm okay. Now, I qualified 5 hours as a qualifier when you're blind. I qualified in May, and then I was going to run the Bay State Marathon. And, you know, I actually had a little problem. 23 and a half miles before somebody who's about half my size here who was guiding me caught me when I passed out. We had a food problem. I didn't have any nutrition for the race and didn't realize that was catching me until 23 and a half. Now, ultimately, that was a setback, but I had another race in a short time. I had the National Marathon Championship because what we learned along the way is in terms of blind runners, I'm actually fairly quick. In terms of totally blind runners, I could maybe compete to place first, second, or third in the national championship. So I went out to California about a year ago. It was December 7th. And I had another interesting choice that I think has a lot of power in our lives. I had a friend who never run a marathon, was going to learn to run one to guide me for that. And the interesting thing is he's much faster than me in sprints and things. But at distance, what he discovered, he spent 18 weeks training up for a marathon, and he discovered he couldn't keep the pace I wanted to keep for that marathon. And so he came to me, and he said, I need us to run a little slower. I really want to guide you. And I'm a competitive guy. I want to try to win a national championship, but I also love my friends, and I cherish my teammates. So what do I do? And I'm sad that it took me so long, but I took some time to think about it, and I chose to run with my friend. And there I learned another powerful lesson, because when we got out to California and started running together, he'd run alone. For many people, running is a solo sport. For me, it has to be a team sport. And what we learned together running is that we could encourage each other through the toughest times and support each other. And he and I both ran our personal best that day together. And we took the national championship by 25 minutes, right? Imagine if I had chosen to run with somebody else, abandoned a friend, the win would have felt so much more empty. And think about how much sweeter it was because I made the right decision and let the rest take care of itself. Now, I fly out Friday. I'm going to go try and win it again. So we'll see what happens. But that said, I think the message of when you are evaluating your choices, do the right thing. The rest take care of itself. Tracy, would you flip slide for me? Did I get that promise fulfilled? Did I flip off that slide already? Okay, thank you. So this is the, this is going to be Quinn in Boots, or am I at, I'm sorry? Liberty. So apologize for that. What this is flags on the 48. When the towers fell in New York, a lot of hikers weren't sure how to respond, and a couple of them wanted some perspective on life. And they climbed Mount Liberty and they raised an American flag to celebrate the people that we should all celebrate, the first responders, the firemen, the police, all sorts of people who make our life possible in all kinds of good ways. And that's what they did. They didn't want to focus on the horror of the towers falling and all the messages behind there, just like the bombing in the marathon. But what I think is really good to remind us is find positive ways to celebrate. That doesn't mean you're not trying to solve the other problems. But put your focus on the things that are positive and how to go forward with those as well. And they did that, and the program became so successful, many of the hikers out here, I know there's a few, know about Flags on the 48, which is the Saturday closest to 9/11. Every one of the 48 has a flag raised. And in 2010, I got to be part of that program on Mount Liberty. And what I loved about it is the flag that was raised there. The gentleman who raised that flag, he had tears in his eyes when he raised it, and he told us the story. He joined the program because he loved the message. It became more powerful when during 2005, I believe it was, his son, even though he'd already been in the program, his son had gone to Afghanistan and been killed. And the flag that he was raising was the one that had been on the coffin of his son. And people say, why do you put yourself through this? And he said, it's very hard. But I want to surround myself with people who understand and get that message, that we put the focus on the right things. People who understand the sacrifices that come from that. And I was so proud to be there. And that's a gift in the moment, that if I chose to not be invested in life, I would have missed the power of his words that day. And I do continue to surround myself like that. Tracy, if you flip slide for me, move quickly through a couple of these. There's Teddy Bruschi. I mentioned him earlier, and apparently somehow we scored a touchdown on the trail. I don't know how we did that. But what I love about this, so Teddy and I became friends his rookie year because we shared the same birthday. And his rookie year, there was an event on our birthday, and I yelled out, "Happy birthday, rookie." And, you know, that started our discussions, and his name is Bruschi, and one of my hobbies is I'm a home brewer. So I made a beer, Bruschi, in his honor. And I love double entendres and gave it a slogan of full tilt, full time. I love hard-working overachievers, which he was. Now, his career, he won his 3rd Super Bowl. He went to a Pro Bowl. He flew back from Hawaii after the Pro Bowl, and that night had a stroke. And he couldn't see out of the right quadrant of each eye, and he couldn't walk right. And he was frustrated, and he wanted to quit, and I know how that feels. And he asked me, how do I do it? Because at that time, I was totally blind and in a wheelchair, and we were friends. And he said, how do you do it? And I said, well, those lessons we talked about, celebrate what you can do. If there's something you can't, find a solution and go to the people who already know how to solve it. That's why he was at Spalding Rehab, seeing some of the best in the world. He went back and played professional football again. Never been done in any professional sport after a stroke. And he does a lot for that cause. It's a testament to his strength, right? Wrote a book, Never Give Up. He gives me some nice respect in a chapter in there. But the real power of Teddy came after he retired. When there's a project called the Wounded Warriors, and they asked him to be a celebrity hiker, because sometimes soldiers came back with wounds, and the soldiers themselves didn't believe in their abilities because they focused on their disability. And they come back to a community that didn't believe in their ability because they focused on their disability. So they wanted to do the reverse. They wanted to celebrate ability awareness, and to raise attention, they were going to climb Kilimanjaro, the tallest standalone mountain in the world. And they asked Teddy to be a celebrity hiker. He said yes. And then he called me and said, I've never hiked a day in my life. Will you teach me? And I was like, you've never hiked a day in your life, and you said I'm going to do the tallest standalone mountain in the world. I've seen a couple football games. Will Belichick hire me as a coach? Right? But ultimately, we went out and we hiked in the Belmonts here in New Hampshire, and we chose, it was May 1st, so it was kind of a harder time to be in the whites with the monorail. So we chose the Belmonts, and we spent a whole day hiking and lots of fun. But what I really loved is a couple of months later, he climbed Kilimanjaro, got to the summit, one of 2 celebrities to make it. And one of the soldiers who reached the summit with him is a woman who had lost her vision from shrapnel. And they both tell me the difference the experience he had made in that accomplishment. And I had asked him that right on the day 1 of the hike. I said, Teddy, tell me the truth. Any of your friends, any of your teammates give you a hard time about asking a blind guy from New Hampshire to teach you how to hike? And he said, you bet. They do. I'm like, why'd you do it? He said, it's what you taught me when I needed it most, is that when you want to solve a problem, who solved it? I said, yeah, but there's better hikers in the world. He said, true. But you hike with some challenges that makes it different. And you and I, Randy, have built a team together. We understand each other, and you've got to respect your teammates. All right, good decision, and it obviously worked out. Think of the ripple of influence, too, by the way. I wished a kid happy birthday. Look what it came to. You just never know where the word you say is going to encourage somebody or discourage them if you say the wrong words, right? Be that source of encouragement and surround yourself by the same, and you never know where you'll go. Tracy, if you flip slide for me. Instead of thinking about where you can go and how high, I want to pause and talk about how far you've come. This is me at the Grand Canyon. It's on my honeymoon in 2012. And I know it looks like I'm photoshopped in there. It's so ridiculous. But the Grand Canyon is really that beautiful. And, you know, it's funny. My wife, who often describes things very well for me, was overwhelmed on this trip. And her descriptions at that point in time were, wow, 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 which really isn't very helpful. I get the emotion part of it, right? So what I did, my iPhone, fully accessible to me out of the box, right? I take my iPhone and I take a picture in the direction of the wow, and I load it up on Facebook, and I say, hey, how about some descriptions, please? And you know, we started hiking. We're going down Bright Angel Trail. And boy, hiking here in the White's Twisty Rocky Rudy out there, it's smooth. And I loved it. And I was hiking fast. And it's sort of funny as we're passing people, they're saying, hey, no dogs allowed here. And I chuckle, I get it, right? Because unfortunately, a lot of people bring dogs where they shouldn't or pretend to have a service animal. And I'm like, well, no, this is my service dog. I'm totally blind. And they're like, no, you're not. And I laugh, you know, what, are we going to play the pokey eye game, right? How do we find this out? But I understood where they were coming from because it's sometimes hard to believe, right? I wouldn't have believed it back when I first went blind, that I could be climbing mountains or hiking the Grand Canyon. And it's really about education. And it's also about realizing how far we've come. When I started hiking, I wouldn't have been that fast. I'd have struggled, but I'd learned so much. And I think all of us need to sometimes reflect and appreciate and congratulate ourselves for how far we've come, because that helps give you perspective for setting your new goals. And that's what I took that day. By the way, we got down to the Oasis halfway down, which is all we were going that day, right? So we stopped there and I had almost 100 descriptions from my friends about what that looked like, the layer cake look of it. And boy, there's teamwork and community serving me again. And it's another advantage I had in always trying to build friendships and supportive people around us. So nice message there. Tracy, would you flip slide for me? That's Quinn in boots. So you got to protect your teammate. We're hiking the Ammonoosuc Ravine Trail on Mount Washington on July 4th, 2010. And the rocks there are sharp. It's microschist, the geology of it. And Quinn could cut his paws. That's why he's wearing those boots. And he didn't like them very much. And as you can see, sometimes we're not hiking, we're scrambling. That's New England in some places. That was Kilimanjaro in some places. But it shows the concern of him. I'd be scrambling up to him, and it shows my concern for him. When we ran, his pads hardened, and he no longer needed the boots. Boy, solutions come in all the way when you're looking for them, right? And that was more of the reason why we ran so much together. Tracy, if you flip slide for me. Just a few more left. This is a split screen. And in one of those, what you see is why it's so easy for me. Go from that twisty, rocky scramble to look how easy it's for us to walk there. And you understand why in the winter, my speed triples compared to the summer, or better. On the other side, we're on the Mount Willie ladders. We're heading to go down them. And it's funny, we were doing a traverse. There's 3 peaks you can do, Tom, Field, and Willie. And as we're coming towards that, we passed a lot of groups going the other direction. And they would whisper to my teammates, whisper in front of the blind guy, you can't take the blind guy down those stairs. Because the Willie ladders, it's a couple of 100 feet overall that you're going to descend. And it's half staircase, half ladder, and covered with snow and ice. And it was funny because I could hear them just fine. But what we had learned, much to my dismay, is that there are times where a dog guide doesn't work best. If we're going down those ladders, we didn't just try it with a 100-foot drop-off, right? We practiced where you might fall 2 feet to see how it would work. And he would end up pulling me down, or I'd pull him over. It wasn't safe. And problem solving, risk management, right? The most risky thing any of us will do is probably get in a car, honestly, right? And you can mitigate that by getting in the car with somebody who's not texting or tweeting while they're driving, or knowing that they're a good driver and good driving conditions. Those things help manage risk. But in that instance, by using a human and putting my hand on the pack, it was easier because they're higher for us to each keep and work together safely. So having the right guide for the right occasion is the lesson I took from that. Right? When we're choosing who's going to influence the decisions we make, well, who are you going to choose? The people who are succeeding at the things you want to do? Or the people who just talk about the thing you want to do? Right? Be careful. Find the right guide to model how you're going to approach things. And that will help you find success more commonly. Flip slide for me, Tracy. Here, poor Autumn has been subject to Quinn. When does she get a picture? Well, here's her picture. This is Mount Chicorowa. And what I have her in there for is not just to include a picture of my beautiful girl, but she is hiking with me sooner and better than Quinn and I did because all that I learned with him, we could apply together. And sometimes your guides in life have to change. Sometimes your community has to change. And I didn't want that change. But there are times it has to happen. And you know what? If I expected of her to be everything that Quinn was, I'd have set us up for failure. And I worked very hard. She doesn't like to run. Well, she does. She likes to sprint for 100 yards and then do nothing. All right? That doesn't work real well for the marathon. So I know people who take that approach. Right? But the truth is, if we stay open to say each relationship we build is based on them and us finding what works for us, that's the way to build teammate, one person at a time, and then integrate and work it. And we're doing great things together, she and I. She's got, I think, 6 of the 48 under her belt, and I don't have a list anymore. We're just going to hike when and where we want and enjoy it. So now I'm going to pause and go to this one powerful description, I think, to share with you. which is that I say ability awareness, celebrate what you can do, but if there's something you want to do, you can do it. Believe and achieve, right? In schools, I teach the students my backwards ABCs, CBA, conceive, believe, achieve. Well, if I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to say I can't see, I better challenge that notion, because I told you I was going to share a little bit about vision with you tonight. So here's this. July 4th, you saw a picture earlier, we climbed Mount Washington. And usually the weather's awful up there, as many of you probably know. And when we got up to Lake of the Clouds, the AMC hut between Monroe and Washington, we stopped. We're going to spend the night there, and there's 90 people that stay at that hut, and it was a beautiful night. And we go out to watch this amazing sunset. And as we're sitting out there, what you see is there's 7 mountain ranges that run south to north across New Hampshire. You know, up close, you have the Lafayette Ridge you saw earlier, and you got Cannon and the Kinsmans, and you know, as you go out further, you got a few in Vermont, and then in the horizon, in New York State, hundreds of miles away is the Adirondacks. And they look small, but they're 4,000 footers too. And as the sun's angle went lower and lower, those mountains began to take on a purple hue, just like the song for Purple Mountain's Majesty. And those hills in Vermont, they had a blue tint to them. You got into the lush green of our New Hampshire mountains and the stark gray cliffs. And up above, there were these thin, wispy clouds. They're called cirrus clouds. And they didn't block the sun. They captured it resplendently because it was lines, striations of crimson red on the horizon. And you went higher and they turned into an orange like an oak leaf in the autumn. And higher above still, those clouds were pink striations all the way back behind us. Just incredible. And everybody watching this was silent, except for describing it to me, obviously, and overcome because the majesty and splendor of that scene was just incredible. And the sun had been set for a minute before anybody started to move. And what did they do? They began to clap because they were applauding that beauty. And you know, the hairs on the back of my neck were up because being in the palpable emotions of that moment was so rewarding. And here's the powerful example I'd like to share with you, I hope. If what I say next is true, say yes. If not, please say nothing. But if it's true, give me a loud yes. Did any of you picture that? How can that be? You didn't see it, and I didn't see it. And it's because vision is 80%, call it imagination if you want, but it's really 80% neurology. It's our brain putting together the images, and our eyes are only one way for it to get there. Read the description in a good book, feel out the podium, or listen to the description of a blind guy, and you can have it. Right? Sight lets you see everything that's around you right now. I don't have that. But vision is like super sight. Vision lets you see everything that's around you right now a little differently, and all the possibility it can become. Right? You don't get vision just because you have sight, and you don't need sight to have vision. You need to make the right choices. That's how you get there. Tracy, would you flip slide for me? That's that sunset. Now, where are the colors, Randy? Because I didn't know this at first. Would you believe nobody took a picture once the sun got low enough for the colors? Because they were all overwhelmed by how beautiful it was. Wait, you got 90 people, nobody gets a picture of it? Right? So if you want to see it, you're going to have to use your vision, or you're going to have to get out there and use your sight yourself. Right? And you have to catch the right day. Tracy, flip slide for me one more time. We've got 2 slides left, this and one more. That is I'm on Mount Field, and I've got a Grey Jay in my hand, eating out of the palm of my hand. And you know, that's a pretty magical experience. And it's the bonus. If you remember back to goal setting, I said there were 3 benefits. You're going to reach more goals when you set them. You're going to get skills that will help you reach even more goals. And you're going to be able to use those skills on negative adversity, on challenges in life. Well, there's one more bonus. I call it the magic on the path of life. When you're invested in those moments, things will happen to you that may not happen if you choose to not be invested. And what I really love to illustrate that is that man in the background of this picture with me, his name's Ben Becker. He fancies himself a manly man, tough guy, never show emotion. You tell me that's not awe and wonder on his face. Right? Now, there's a lot of discussions about leave no trace, should I feed a Grey Jay? And the answer is I don't choose to anymore for a lot of reasons. But I think the magic of that moment is worth it. You know, in true leave no trace, we'd never be out there. Right? You've got to find the right balance of what part of enjoying the experience, being out there, and how to have minimal impact. But for that moment, I think it's worth it for the thousands of people I get to affect by that, to remind yourself that being in the moment, making the right choice will lead some gifts. One more photo, Tracy, for me. That's my boy Quinn. So here's the interesting part. Remember way back when Justin fell and I said he was stubborn and I'm going to show you how I was too? So I had that goal, 10 leisurely years to climb all 48, and 37 months after I set that goal, I finished my 2nd round on Mount Flume. And I'm really proud of that accomplishment. The reason we sped it up is because I was having so much success and enjoyment, I just wanted to keep going. And Mount Flume was my final one. We wanted to celebrate. I was going to go up the Osseo Trail, the backside of Flume, to get to just Flume. And I made the announcement, we shared with everybody that we're doing that. And the day after I made the announcement, the White Mountain National Forest closed the Osseo Trail for hurricane repair. So I was frustrated. I was angry because, they canceled, they changed my plans. Now I have to climb up over Mount Liberty. There's another way, but I had to climb over Liberty, out to Flume and back. I had to hike more, and I'm mad. But I like hiking. Why was I mad? Because I was stubbornly holding. They forced me to change my idea. And the beauty of it, and obviously I changed my mindset, but it took me a moment because we have moments of failure, and that's okay. But the beauty of it is that this photo, probably my favorite photo now, remember I showed you my second favorite, I love the look of devotion on his face. He's looking up at me, and the comfort he has in that environment where we spend so much time together, right? That photo probably doesn't get taken if we only had done the Osseo Trail. That is Flume, but it just affects which way you're going to be up there. And we didn't know it then. That would be our last hike together. We had no idea that he had cancer yet, but we would learn it soon after, and he and I would never hike again. Do the right thing. You get your plans changed. Open your mind to them and say, how can I make the best out of this? And who knows what height you could reach. I have a finishing message, but before I get there, I want to take a moment, take any questions you have. I know Stuart Wallace is going to help me out, so if you have questions, raising your hand for me won't help much, but I think he'll see your hand. He'll go over with a microphone. And
If you have a question, just let me know, and I will take the mic to you.
And my standard rule is if I can get 3 questions, then everybody feels comfortable asking questions. Those first three are the hard ones because you don't know how mean I'm going to be when you ask it, right? But if you don't ask it, what happens is people line up afterwards, and we will stay for a little while afterwards, and 10 people in a row will ask me the same question. So save me. Ask 3 questions.
Oh, here's one right here.
Yeah, hi. I'm Jim. My question is, when you ran the Boston Marathon without your dog, the girl that was helping you at the end, was that your partner running the race, or?
So yes, she was helping me. So I'll talk about that. I would not have run a marathon with my dog guide. I think 26.2 on pavement would be too much for a dog, right? But Quinn would have helped me train a lot for it. He opened the door to marathons for me, I would think. But I run with what's called sighted guide. I use that stick you saw. We actually use a blind cane. I use a rigid tether. Most of the blind running community uses a soft tether. They use either a bungee cord or a shoelace. I really find the rigid tether, the cane has a much better advantage, makes it a little easier for my guides, so I'm told. But they hold one end, I hold the other, and we run together. Now, often on a long race, I might have 2 guides, right? So that one of them might run, because if you're guiding, you're doing a lot more work than you would if you're just running it for yourself, because you've got to think about telling me to know when I can get behind you, warning me if there's a pothole that we can't naturally avoid, or the biggest challenge of all is people weaving in and out. The number of times people have stepped in front of me not knowing that I'm not going to see them. And I'm 6'4", not 200 pounds anymore, but close. That's a lot of force moving at you. So in that instance, that was Christine Hood. Her husband, Pete, guided me for the first half of Boston. She guided me for the second half. She's actually the stronger runner. And her husband, Pete, actually is going to guide me in the National Marathon Championship. He wants to finish a marathon, so we'll do the second half out there. But 3 hours, 50 minutes, and 37 seconds was my Boston time. I hope to beat that out in California.
All right, we have 2 more questions here at least. There's one.
Yes, I'm wondering if there was a time when you're hiking up a mountain and you're in great shape and ready to cruise onto the summit, but your dog said no more and just stopped and wouldn't go, and what did you do?
Sure. So I'll tell you the first part of that. The first time he ever said no was our very first mountain together. And we're climbing Packmonadnock, little Packmonadnock over in Wilton, New Hampshire. And we're going to go up the Marion Trail. The Walpack Trail. It's a little more like what you'll see in the Whites. And he weaves me around the first couple of boulders, avoiding obstacles like they're trained to do. And we come to the first point where we're going to have to take a 3-foot step up. And he balks at that 3-foot step because that's really every bit of terrain he's been trained to keep me off of. And the funny part is he's trained his whole life for how to guide a blind guy safely. And I'm climbing my first mountain blind, and I'm about to ignore him. So he takes me to that step, and he stops. And I say, hop up, because I tapped it with a hiking stick, the step. And instead of hopping up, he backed up, which is the dog equivalent of, no way, this is dumb. And I think, I understand. I'm going to show him that it's okay. 6'4" legs, I can do that 3-foot step. So I step up, and I check with the cane to make sure I'm not going to hit my head, and I lunge up to take that big step, and I'm like, look, buddy, and bam, I crack my head, because it turns out Quinn was better at math than me. 6-foot guy, 3-foot step, 8.5-foot branch, and I just missed it, but he could see it. And he's like, you're going to hit your head on that, right? So after I hit my head, he's all wriggly like, I told you, I told you. Now, what I learned there was trust the process. Now, to answer your question, did he ever say, no, I don't want to go? And absolutely, it happened to us twice, and both times we turned around. One time was because his paws were too cold on it, and they'd gotten wet. And now a lab's paws dry out really well, and I try to use, there's things called paws, P-A-W-Z, that can keep snow and ice from building up on their paws. I use it for salt on pavement, really. But apparently water had gotten into it, his paw was cold, took it out, and you know what? We turned around, because got to keep him safe. The other time was similar. It was just really crazy windy, and he didn't want to go up onto the summit at that point. And that's, you know, I carried doggy goggles for him because to protect his eyes, and you carry the Vaseline to put on his nose because exposed flesh for him too, right? But if it was too cold, then we knew what it was. I learned where his temperature comfort limit was. And then you go back, just like you do when anybody. What do you do when somebody in your hiking group can't go? You stick together and you get them out safely, right? Because summit fever can bite anybody, and I have had it bite me before where you push on when you shouldn't. And that's not something I want to do, and you have to learn to identify that. And in the case of Quinn, right, we learned working with a vet, what's the right conditions, what's safe for him. I didn't just expose him to it and say, oh, look, I guess he survived. Too valuable to me for me to ever do that. Autumn likes it a little warmer than Quinn. Right? He was a little more comfortable with colder temperatures. How about another question?
I have one right here.
What's your favorite hike or mountain?
You know, it's sort of like my favorite song. They have different moods, different songs, different moods, different mountains. So I'll tell you, the one I use when I want a hiker to really love a mountain, I love to take them, you know, somebody who's not been a hiker, I'm sorry, I love to take them to Welch Dickey, right? Because you don't have to work very hard to get to that first ledge, and it's beautiful. And then, you know, you can see the summit. It's only half a mile further, right? It's sort of like tempting them on, and you get a little bit of every type of challenge. And just as a little extra special, I proposed to my wife on the summit of Mount Welch, so it has some sentimental value. And she's my wife, so I guess she said yes. Though she didn't really say yes, she nodded her head. And I was like, could I have a verbal answer, please? So I love that. I have some magical moments, like, you know, when we finished that Prezi Traverse, as cold as it was in Washington, and we come down the Ammonoosuc Ravine Trail glissading. For those of you who don't know what glissading is, when you deliberately sit on your snow pants and slide down the trail, that's glissading. When you do it by accident, that's called falling. I've done both. But we glissaded probably for about 0.8 of a mile down the Ammonoosuc Ravine Trail, and we've got some great videos of it. But as I'm sliding down, Quinn is pouncing on me to try to lick my face, pull my hat off, just joyous. And we get to the bottom. We're still above Gem Pool, but we get to the bottom there, and the people with me stop. Justin and Dina, they got married. They met hiking with me that winter. They got married. They have a little girl. And one of the powerful things I remember was them saying, "Oh my God." And I could hear wonder in their voice. I'm like, what? And what happened is, from there you could see the Lafayette Ridge, and it was a light and alpine glow. When the sun has set beyond the mountain and it's snow-covered, sometimes the mountain seems to glow fluorescent pink. It's called alpine glow. And it had done that. And the ground around us had rime ice that had grown up from the ground. It's frost ice that grows up from the ground. So you get these fist-sized diamond-shaped crystals, and the pink light is hitting them and scattering everywhere. Think about the gorgeousness of that moment. You know, and we just done a Northern Prezi Traverse, so obviously proud. We'd slid down like kids. We see that scene. And then if that's not enough, we start hiking out from there. The sun is set. It starts to get dark. We stop to put on headlamps, and then they stop their headlamps because the full moon rose over Mount Washington. And it was lit in this beautiful white winter, like we're walking in like a fairy forest. I mean, it's just incredible. You get those moments by being there. Do I have favorite hikes? I have a ton. Most of them involve the people with whom I hiked. Come on, girl. So thank you for that question. You can tell I get passionate about it, right? That's why I hike. It's fun that it's visual too, right? So,
anyone else with a good question? You know, I asked Randy at some point in the early going to talk about possibilities, not disabilities. Did you notice he did that without looking at notes? Was that an hour and a quarter? Exceptional. But we have one more question up here. Hang on.
I heard about a mouthpiece that could help. I think a blind guy like climbed K2 or something with the use of it, was able to see by training his tongue to basically see.
Sure. So I didn't know he climbed K2 with it, but I can tell a little bit about that. It's called the brain port, right? And I actually used it. People often ask me, how'd you get out of the wheelchair? I did a couple of things, right? One of the things was a surgery where they went through my eardrum. It's called the transtympanic injection, and put a steroid they developed trying to save the spinal cord nerve from Christopher Reeves. So they basically made my inner ear shout louder to my brain. That helped my balance through my inner ear. It helped rebuild my cerebellum. But the other method I used to get out of the wheelchair was something called the BrainPort. And it has two versions. It has a balance version and a vision version. And it's funny that the blind guy used the balance version instead. But I wore a gyroscope on my tongue, same piece, so that if my head tipped down, it would put the signal on the forward part of my tongue, and it would help me keep my head level, your body follow. That's your proprioceptive response, your connection to the ground. The version, the same company, they use a camera it's got a small point camera, and it's got a laser to get distance, and they send that information through to your tongue. And you can actually, they've got people reading large letters slowly and difficult, but your brain is very plastic. It will always grow, and your sense of taste is an area that continually remains highly plastic late in your life, and your tongue is a moist conductor, always ready. And my wife wants me to get it mostly to shut me up, I think. But what a wonder. That, to me, I wouldn't want to have to give up talking all the time, and I also think there'd be some awkward parts, but what a way to develop. There's also a blind man named Daniel Kish who clicks and uses echolocation to build images, and he's got blind kids riding bicycles on city parks, right? It's incredible. Believe in possibility, right? So yeah, I know about that device. The company who makes it is called WCAB. They're based out of Wisconsin. Anything else out there?
I think that's...
Okay.
Looks like...
Here's my last message. I'm going to stay here for a little while afterwards. If you want to talk, you want to come up and say hi to Autumn, I can put her off duty. But first off, I build community. So if you like what I've said today, come get a card and share our message far and wide, because I love what we get to do. But I really believe in choosing the right response. I could have been a blind guy who focused on being blind. I'm a person who is blind because I made the choice that I'm going to be a person who lives his life and follows his dreams, right? I say that I can do anything, and I get out there and I really try to do whatever's important to me. And I don't do everything. I do everything that's important to me. That's the message I have, especially for the students here, but it really applies to all of us. If there's something important to you, get passionate about it, because it's hard not to reach your goals when you're passionate about it. It's called the power purpose, and I mentioned it in regards to Boston. When I ran up Heartbreak Hill is not a big hill. But you've just run it's your fourth hill after you'd done 20 miles. It's mile 20 to 21. A lot of that downhill, then 3 big uphills, and you get to Heartbreak Hill, and it breaks a lot of people's heart. I don't think I could have been stronger, because I chose that mile. I dedicated to Quinn. That was my purpose. I was going to get up that hill and be strong. I think that's so important, to be passionate about the things that are important to you. I believe I can do anything, and I really, for you students, believe that so can you. But it doesn't matter what I believe. It starts with what you believe. And it starts with your willingness to problem solve and persevere, not magic. But I know that if you do that, if you build a vision for where you want to be in the world, you can get there. Like I said earlier, right? If you don't have sight, you can still have vision. If you do have sight, you don't get vision unless you choose the right response. So start there. Choose the right response, and you too can be reaching your peak potential. And I can tell you that makes for a really rewarding life. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Hop up, girl. Good girl.
That concludes our session tonight. I'm sure that some of you want to come up and see Randy and Autumn. The rest of you may want to come out and have some refreshments. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you.